Hey, hope everyone's doing well. It's Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. Yeah. So I'm your host for Techractive today. My name is Eugene, and I have a special guest with me today as well. She's none other than my fellow host, Joy. Joy, would you like to introduce
Hi.
yourself?
Yep. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for inviting me in this event. So I'll be Eugene's co-host today, one of the Tech for Change ambassadors.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you don't know, actually separated by an ocean. So Joy is in the Philippines right now, and I'm in Singapore. So pretty much it's
Correct.
gonna be an exciting session. Yeah.
Okay.
So uh, hopefully you guys are all done with dinner and yeah, ready for this session. So just to kick things off, right? Today's session will be talking about something very close to our hearts. As so, it's about building modern commerce modern architecture for d-commerce. So, uh, I think many of us actually here in this session, and even our speakers themselves, they come from a commerce background or even content and marketing background, and they worked on a bunch of commerce projects. So I think this is a pretty interesting topic that we'll dive into today. So we're going into the under the hood of what happens behind a commerce architecture, and yeah, and what it means to build a commerce architecture that is modern and scalable in today's world. So moving on to the next slide, please. Yep. So for those of you who are new to us, welcome. So we are Techractive. Who we are a bunch of geeks from Accenture Interactive, or it could be anywhere even, about who are actually interested in building technologies, interested in technologies and how upcoming technology trends actually shape lives around us in our communities. So what we aim to do here is to build a community of like-minded technologists. We also want to discuss important topics with people who are in the same interests, and also we want to help guide and shape the future for technologists as well who are growing in this space. So yeah, welcome to Techractive. I hope you are in for a great ride here with us. So if you guys haven't seen our website and our community on LinkedIn, feel free to check us out. The QR code is there to scan to visit our website. And we will post updates about events. We are exploring different things that we can post on the page as well to keep you guys updated of our latest happenings as well. And you can feel free to follow us on LinkedIn as well, where we are engaging the community in various discussion threads and polls and questions and comments. So feel free to check us out there as well. So now moving into the topic proper, right? I believe everyone's very excited to see our guests, right, Joy? Would you like to introduce our guest today?
Yep, it is my honor to introduce our three guest speakers for today. So our first speaker, he loves to exercise, particularly jogging. Let's give a warm of applause to our Sitecore technical architect, Joseph Christian Planta. Happy Tuesday, Jam!
Thank you, Joy. Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Christian Planta, but you can call me Jam for short.
Hello. And then our next speaker, he is a fan of NBA and volleyball. He also enjoys long drives with his wife during the weekends. Let's give a warm welcome to our commerce technical architect, Dale Bryan Mercado. Happy Tuesday, Brian.
Hi, Joy. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Um, Excited to have a talk with everyone on this lovely evening.
Same here. Okay. And our last speaker for today, she easily cries on movies and stories on news. She loves reading pocketbooks. Let's give a round of applause to our Adobe technical architect, Rachel Calara. Happy Tuesday, Chel.
Happy Tuesday, Joy. Hi, everyone. Good evening or good morning. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, actually. Thank you.
Same here as well. This will be my first Techractive session. So, I'm curious. All of you are technical architect. What does a solution architect do, and how did you end up becoming an architect? Did you choose to be an architect, or how did you become one?
Oh, let me go first, Joy, I guess.
Go ahead, Chel.
Yeah, so I started my career as developer for various programming languages like Visual Basic um, 6, VB.NET, C Sharp, Java, and even Talent for more than 10 years already. When I joined Accenture, I was assigned to a role of application security assessor for Accenture's internal applications that's related to doing ethical hacking and determining the vulnerability of the application. My architecture journey started when I got accepted as a solution architect for customs applications for more than 3 years. That time it was under products industry IG industry group. So when I moved to digital, my focus deals were aligned to digital platforms, solutioning deals related to CMS opportunities like EEM and even Liferay and Sitecore. So as a solution architect, I did not limit myself on requirements gathering, estimation and staffing and all, but I prepare technical architecture diagrams and technical approaches so that it will be easier for me to communicate to subject matter experts. So that's when I started my journey as an architect. Now, when I moved to delivery, my interest was really delivering and architecting AEM applications. So until today, I am providing technical guidance to the project team members, especially to on development or technical approaches. So at present, I am an overall architect on the two ongoing projects in AEM in Middle East. At the same time, a delivery lead as well. So I'm passionate on mentoring and helping junior developers and developing grooming junior architects within the team, even inside the capability as well. So that's how I started my journey as an architect, Choi.
All right, thanks, Chel. So I'm excited to reach out to you if I want to be groomed as one. Okay. Next, Brian, can you answer?
Yeah, sure. So prior to joining Accenture, I was a Java developer for 6.57 years, right? And when I joined Accenture, it was when digital just got started around 2014. So around that time, I was exposed to enterprise platforms, particularly AAM and Hybris. So I was trained in both, but I was first rolled into a Hybris project and then never looked back. Right. So during that time, I was still learning the platform, and eventually I became a tech lead in one of the Australian projects for e-commerce. And then I guess it was just a happy transition. At first, I was introduced with the other solution architects. I was doing reviewing estimates, right? And then as I transitioned more into the role, I became an SME for hybrid e-commerce, particularly. And then I was working with other solution architects in ATCP as well to formulate all of these deals that we have and working with them on estimates particularly. So I guess it's just a happy transition for me from being a developer tech lead SME and then transitioning into the architect role.
That sounds exciting. Thank you, Brian. And last, Jam.
Hi. So for me, when I started joining Accenture, I really doesn't have any interest yet for doing an architecture role, but I just really want to deepen my expertise as a technical guy first. So I just really learn everything continuous learning everything in our platform when we started. So the first project that I joined, we have a really large ecosystem. So I just really do continuous learning during my spare time. And then I think 8 years ago, my leads also gave me an opportunity to be part of mobile, developing mobile applications. So I learned a lot there. I became as well doing estimations. Well, I'm not as expert as Chuck Quesada is, but I learned a lot from him as well during those times. And then as my career goes on, I also learned to develop more, to become much more on architecture role. Much now I'm much more focused on CMS, which is a Sidecore platform, where I really learned a lot in terms of building architecture in a modular way.
Okay, thank you, Jam. Over to you, Eugene.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the very, very like brief introduction. I'm pretty sure you guys have so much more experiences to share, and that's why we have this session today as well, right? Yeah. So, now that we've like briefly heard about your stories, right? Let's jump into the topic proper, which is like building modern commerce, modern architecture for d-commerce, right? So now we need to start with the statement, like the problem statement, which is that what is d-commerce in the first place? Pretty sure it's not many. I'm pretty sure many might have not heard of this term, but if we could go back to the previous slide, yeah. So d-commerce actually refers to the buying and selling of goods and services via various digital channels. So you have so today, if you think about the customer experience, right? We there was previously retail was defined, commerce was defined by the brick and mortar store. You go to a store, you buy an apple, you bring it home. But today, with the rise of digital technologies, you have things coming up like with especially with COVID speeding up this whole digital transformation for the retail market as well, right? So you see things like shopping on the internet through your mobile phones, online shopping. So you can buy an apple literally from your grocer online on a website, on a mobile app even. Yeah, you could go to NTUC online or Redmart even and just buy an apple and it's delivered to your home, all with a push of a button. So with digital commerce coming up, right, you have a lot of things. It's not just about the customer experience is being redefined. How do you seamlessly integrate the omni-channel experience? How do you actually provide the best user experience when you are shopping online? Those are some questions that we are aiming to answer today, as well as to dive down deeper into it, which to understand like how do we make that kind of experience the best possible for your customer. So if we move on to the next slide. Yeah. Yes. So I think for now, this question we want to pose it to Bryan. So first, right, which is for as a commerce architect, and I'm pretty sure you've done so many projects, right? So what are some key concepts and functionalities you've seen behind the building of an online commerce platform, and where do you see the industry will take this forward in the next few years?
Okay, so for this one, right, I have two key concepts to share. I think Eugene, you mentioned it earlier. The first one is being omnichannel, so having a customer having an omnichannel experience, or multi-channel experience for that matter. So it's increasingly necessary, and this will be a common practice for the future of e-commerce. So it's not just a matter of preference, actually, but a matter of convenience, right? So let's say, for example, if you're passing through like a brick and mortar store, like say, for example, Apple or Samsung or Guess, right? You might want to go in, right? You might want to take a peek at their products. But if you have like another appointment or something, right, you might want to look at those products later via their online catalog, right? So right now it's really more of what is convenient for the customer, and usually what is convenient for them is through the sales portal that the other companies and other companies like offer, right, through their mobile apps, desktop applications, right, kiosks, or if the customer passes through a certain store, they have like NFC, right, where you can actually just tap into it, or you can actually scan a QR code for some certain promotions, right? So it's more of like bridging the physical and the online, right? But more so on the omni-channel experience. This is because I read an interesting statistic, right? Back in 2014, particularly in Brazil, around 35 to 40% of the smartphones were sold via mobile apps. Now in 2020, around 80% is sold via online apps, right? So it really goes to show the trend that the customers are going in purchasing their products, right? So, or if on the opposite, right, if you prefer to search for jackets on the internet or buy them online and then pick up directly at the store, right? So you have the buy online, pick up in store model, right, or the locker options for some other countries like Germany or Singapore, right? So that actually reduces the waiting time for the customers, and then it saves them on their shipping costs as well, right? So they can buy it directly, they can pre-order it, but they can pick it up whenever they want, right? So it's more of a convenience thing rather than preference. And this will, well, I would say that this will not end the physical stores, right? So it's just basically ensuring that all of the channels for those companies are actually aligned in terms of their physical stores and their online retail stores. And the second thing that I would like to highlight is basically emphasis on the ease of payments, right? So what I would like to say here is um, the growth of the local payments is actually tremendous in the last couple of years, right? So when I say local payments, it's specific to a certain geography or a certain country, right? So I particularly, right, I have a credit card. My wife does not have a credit card, right? So gone are the days where you can just purchase online via credit card, right? In the Philippines, we have GCash, right? You can just go to your convenience store, top up your GCash, right? And you can just purchase all of this stuff online via Shopee or Lazada, right? So in 2018, all of 11% of Europe's transactions were actually through local payment methods. And in 2020, that's up to around 20%, right? So what does this do? So for this one, right, it actually reduces the cart abandonment for the companies. So what does this mean? So basically, right, if you're a consumer and you go to the product details, you like the product, you add it to cart, and then when you go to the checkout page, right, and then you're left with payment options that are not suitable for you, right? So what do? You basically just close the site or ignore the cart completely, right? Which is basically a loss for all of these companies, right? So by introducing this local payment methods where the customers can actually pay through whatever is available to them, right? So if you don't have any credit cards, you can just top up via like local credits or Shopee coins or whatever, right? Then it will actually increase the profitability of the company. So it's actually one of the things that is being highlighted in one of my client calls, right? Was it's very frustrating for all of these companies when they lose revenue for something that they can avoid, right? So it's not because their products are bad. It's not because their customer experience is bad. It's because they offer something that the customers can't really choose from in terms of like payment methods, right? So there's a study that says that the checkout process, optimizing this through payment methods can actually improve the sales by 35% for any company. So I guess those are the two things that I see for the e-commerce in the future.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty cool actually. I think just to sum up what you've just said, right? It's about ease of access and ease of payments. So these two things actually really make up the big chunk of what a d-commerce architecture should look like. And I really like the fact that you brought up how cart abandonment is very linked to uh, ease of access and ease of payment specifically. So like if you wonder why there are so many payment methods on a commerce website, I guess that's why. Yeah. So I think that was really insightful to understand where the market is today. So maybe moving on, Jam, do you have any thoughts about where what the key concepts and functionalities should make up a modern d-commerce architecture, and where do you see the market going?
Yep. I'm just going to add what Brian has mentioned. There's also web analytics is important as part of the e-commerce. It's because people now are more on trying to access or trying to find an ease access, as Brian mentioned. Like, for example, the first time you try to access an e-commerce, you will just see different type of products. But the next time you access it, it's going to be based on your characteristic and the type that you most browse in the commerce. That's because of the personalizations that is being captured by the data, as well as important thing as well is the localizations, because there are also most users that are aligned to the language or the localizations that they want to adapt, because there are other countries or regions that are really not familiarized with English or different Filipino, so they much more uh, satisfied if it's more on aligned to their local, as well as customizing. So this is what I learned as well as part of when we were building an applications. In terms of personalizations, digital marketing as well, or the ads that we are seeing in our e-commerce or applications that we are seeing, is also aligned to the behavior or characteristic of the users. So digital marketers as well is trying to look for those data, what interests this person, etc. And they do try to do those ads or marketing as part of the e-commerce solutions.
Cool. Yeah, I think that actually plays a lot onto Brian's point as well, like how analytics is something that is very ingrained into modern commerce as well, understanding your customers, understanding their needs as well. Thanks for sharing, Jem. So Chel, do you have any thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I want to talk about the experience. Okay, when we talk about commerce, we first things that come into our mind is selling, right? Selling and buying. There's ordering, there's paying, right? And in terms of CMS like AEM, Adobe Experience, right? Why do we have CMS in e-commerce? Okay, why are those functionalities require CMS where in the architecture, right? Why do we need to integrate those? Okay, so let's take an example of e-commerce where there is a product catalog, right? That's very basic. So for product catalog, when is CMS comes into picture? Okay, and how does it what is the experience in terms of the user, the end user experience, and also the ones managing the site, right? Okay, so for product catalog, right, what are those data that we have in there? We have product description, we have product title, we have images, we have prices, right? So when it comes to architecture and AEM, that's going to be built inside AEM into a component that are going to be reusable in any of the pages, okay? So when we say building it into I'm sorry for being very technical at this point, but so in building into into a component, right, it can be on a page level or it can be on a template level to make sure that it can be easier for the authors or content authors to create a page in few minutes or few seconds, right? Now, when it comes to architecture, when is the Hybris, for example, comes into integration? Okay, so I'm referring to the data sources of those product catalog. Where is the image coming from? So typically it's in the AEM DAM or any DAM technology. And in terms of data, where Hybris come into picture, this is when we are integrating Hybris into AEM, fetching the data related to product description and all other details and information about the product catalog, right? So, so I'm talking about the experience that the content author will have. So with that, having said that, say for example in a typical e-commerce platform, right? If you heard about Black Friday, right? So you heard about it. So Black Friday, this is when normally in Accenture we have a support team where we are preparing for Black Friday, right? So we have to be as an architect, we have to make sure that we're factoring in, we're covering in those promotions during Black Fridays, Christmas, and holidays, in which as a content author, I should be able to create a new page upfront immediately. I will update my image. I would like to have this image, nice image for my target audience, right? So that's really the important of having, integrating AEM, CMS like AEM into e-commerce. It will be fast and it can easily, provide users that experience whenever they go into the website. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Chel, for sharing. I think, as you can tell, right, from our various sharings, that our speakers come from, they actually talked about the entire chain of how a commerce architecture should look like. So we've covered ease of payments, ease of access, as well. It's about the customer. It's all about the customer, like the customer experience, and then analytics as well is also about understanding your customers, right? Understanding your audience. And then we have marketers as well. So the ones that are actually building the site, the ones that are actually configuring your products on the page itself, right, on your website, to make the customer experience as fluid as possible. So we've actually gone through the entire stack of, from the customer all the way to the admin person, the marketer behind the scenes, right? What kind of roles they each play in this whole cycle, and how do we make the experience the best for each actor in this chain or this stack. Yeah. So thanks for sharing, everyone. So maybe moving on to the next question, right? So I think we've covered a lot about what an architecture should look like, but now that we go one step deeper, what kind of systems do you think need to be integrated into fulfilling this landscape, this dream landscape that you're talking about? So maybe can I start with Bryan?
Yeah. So I think you're flashing the slide, right? So I think this slide covers entirely of what my point will be, right? So you have your core e-commerce system, right? So in one of my projects, right? So we're actually doing headless architecture, right? So Jam and Chel can dive more deeper into this in their own topics, right? But like say for example, you have your core commerce system, right? So okay, so just a briefer, right? So basically, headless commerce is just basically wrapping up all of your logic, right? All your functionality into an API or a set of APIs, right? Which is powered by your platforms or specialized backend, right? So you can have like a common place where you can just add to cart or do a pre-order or sending it to an ERP, right? So those are your common e-commerce platforms. In order for us to actually bring up the customer experience, right, and all of these things, we actually need to include other key third-party integrations like CMS, what Chel was talking about earlier with AAM. So that's all too common in my Hybris projects, right? Where we have a Hybris commerce system, and then we're redirecting it to AAM for some promotions, right, or some displays, because like technically AAM is better than Hybris or other out of the box systems, right, commerce systems in there. So we're not only limiting ourselves to just a certain platform, but we're opening up to other platforms as well. And then certainly we have third-party integrations like chatbots, right? Analytics, as Jam was mentioning earlier. So chatbots that actually drives the customer experience as well, and then the customer feels like they can reach out to certain members of the company, right? And it's easier for them to actually like give feedbacks or voice their complaints, right? And then we have our systems, fulfillment systems as well. So I think for all of these big companies, right, some of them already have an established fulfillment process or ERP systems, right, that they're using. So it's a matter of connecting to that existing fulfillment system, and then just leveraging out of that fulfillment system, right? We don't have to build anything from scratch. They might use it in some of their reports or whatnot, right? So it's also integral that we integrate to whatever the client is expecting us to integrate in terms of what is existing in their systems, right? And of course, I think we're moving to the cloud these days, right? So it's not more on the like we're having dedicated servers in some of our companies, right? So we're moving to the cloud. Everything is faster with microservices, right? So it's just a matter of changing one functionality. You don't have to change all of your platform and then publish or build all of the key components of your platform, right? Like one big chunk. You can just simply isolate and then modify that and then release that, right? So it's much easier. It's much faster. It's up to whatever is the global standard nowadays, right?
Cool. Yeah. Maybe would you, if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So I think we've actually seen some. So talking about microservices and all the other patterns that you've seen, right? And what are the various systems that go into this e-commerce architecture, right? So do you have any? I see that you prepared this slide, right, on the how probably a case study of how you would see and envision a e-commerce architecture should look like. So Bryan, would you like to take us through this as well?
Yeah, so this is basically just an example of what I was mentioning earlier with regards to headless architecture, right? So before, in my case, right, for SAP Hybris, it's just one big monolithic platform, right? So when in 2020 we had a Japanese client, right, where we moved to a different front end architecture that is totally separate from what Hybris offers, right? So it's just more extendable, right? So basically we're just offering some functionality to them. We're exposing some APIs and functionality, and it's up to that front end how it's gonna render it, right? So it gives more flexibility actually to whoever's gonna develop it, right? So oh, here you go, we have a set of functionalities, right? Go build out the front end with whatever technologies you want, as opposed to what is out of the box or what is in the vanilla for your certain platform, right? So basically the head here is the CMS, and basically headless just means we're moving some key components, right? Like your front end CMS out of the body, which is the e-commerce platform, and then we're putting it on a different server or a different implementation, right? It depends on what the customer wants. So this is just an example of the Spartacus Hybris project that we've done last year for a Japanese client.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe we'll revisit this topic in a while when we go into the case studies. So Jem, now for you, right? What do you think are the various systems that need to be integrated to d-commerce architecture landscape?
Yeah. Yeah. Something to add as well on what Brian mentioned is it's really important as well to really, well, we're now moving on to headless or decoupling all the components or applications that we have because it's easier for us to scale and integrate different kinds of applications. So as one thing that we want to highlight is, as Brian mentioned earlier as well, like by doing this kind of architecture or decoupling all our applications separately, it's easier for us to scale, especially the flexibility for us to scale up and develop more uh, custom front end that can consume it. And as well as in terms of analytics, it's just easier for us just to add more integrations to whatever analytics platform that we want to use. There is a Google, there's Google, there's built in as well for some CMS applications like for Sidecore, there's a built-in analytics there that we can use as well for personalization. I think AEM, there's also for Adobe Analytics that we can also use for integrations. So having an app architecture decoupled or headless will make the team or the developers to easier integrate different types of platform or applications.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll revisit this topic as well about scalability and decoupling, right? But yeah, I just wanted to point out also earlier that Brian said something like AEM is better than most out of the box content tools out there. I think that made Chel very happy actually. Just but yeah, so Chel, on to you, right? What do you feel about this question as well?
Right. So I can say that AEM is Hybrid's best friend. Okay. So yeah, when actually it comes to architecture and implementing and integrating AEM into Hybris, right? As I've mentioned earlier, because we're building components as reusable and easy to use for the authors, the one creating the pages, right? Maybe because also on the flexibility and in the dynamic of the architecture. For example, regardless if it's so in AEM, the default for AEM is actually the HTML, right? If you're familiar on that, using Sightly. Now, at the back, when we are building the component, so we build the component, we have the Java, sometimes we have the Java servlets in there because we need to fetch data from Hybris. Now, when we create it inside AEM, we have this JSON, okay, we have this JSON file as a model, send it back to, for example, React or even Angular, to make it headless. So we're using React, for example. We send it back to React, and React would render the pages in the front end. It's actually, I'm not calling it very, very simple, but in terms of architecture, we're actually building it that way in terms of implementing AEM and Hybris. It will be easier for the developers as well to render all the pages because it's already in JSON coming from AEM. Right. So you're flashing the architecture in which, so I have here the Hybris e-commerce. There are also kind of custom back-end applications like omni-channel platform. I'm actually working on a transactional and like an e-commerce project right now where it's not integrating into SAP Hybris, but it's integrating into an exposed API, okay, integrated into an AEM just on the below there. Okay, where it's also integrated into some legacy applications and other third-party system. Okay, so looking at the picture, if you can cross out the Hybris in there at the right. So there's also some architecture that is where the transaction is integrating into API. For example, those built in RPG API, right, where they are exposing list of products all product categories, available products, the prices, the promotions, and all. So basic transactional of e-commerce where it's AEM plays a vital and big role in order for us to develop an e-commerce. It's not a very complex e-commerce, okay, but because we're using AEM, we're building it as if we have actually hybrids on it. Okay, so we build servlets, we build services, and we develop reusable components that can be easily drag and drop into the pages and exposed to JSON into React, and React will manage all the pages as headless. Okay, so that is another type of architecture that we also have in terms of commerce and other integration.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the whole idea about JSON being returned based on whatever needs are required on the front end side, right? Those actually tie in very nicely with what Bryan and Jen has been saying also. It's always about decoupling. It's always about making your site scalable as well. And so if I have a different context, I have a different need. And then it's all for, like Chel was saying, if I play around with the configurations that I built certain reusable components, like how do we mix and match them quickly so that the site is deployed quickly and things change quickly as well. So those are some key concepts I think we can bring in about the solution architecture behind the e-commerce platform. So I think we've gone quite into detail. We've seen quite a bit, right? I think now we want to know, okay, what are the case studies, like some interesting things that you have done, right, for various projects or clients that you want to share with us with regards to all the principles and all the techniques that you just spoke about. So maybe can we start with Bryan? Would you like to share?
Okay, so the latest last project, my last project, right? It's actually one of the premier Japanese companies, right? Biking companies. So when the pandemic hit last year, right? So there were certain restrictions, not just in Southeast Asia but around the world, right? So people were not really allowed to go outside much, right? But during that time, I think the client wanted to boost their and it was not like during the pandemic. The project started pre-pandemic, right? But the pandemic just boosted it, right? So they're moving into digital transformation, right? So we built last year the first Accenture project where we actually used SAP Spartacus, right? So we delivered that for the Japanese client last year. So we're the first ones to actually do that and actually increase the revenue by the client threefold, right? And then I have these other clients where we're just massively rolling out e-commerce stores, right, for the client. So when I joined around April, that client had around 32 stores, and then that's second quarter of Q2, and now they're opening up another 9 stores by end of Q3. So that just goes to show the trend that the pandemic does, right, in terms of not just companies closing physical stores, but they're actually being very smart about it, right? So we're closing the stores temporarily, right? All of our key stores, but actually we're opening up our online sales platform, right? In order for us to actually augment all of those losses or whatnot, right? In order to increase our revenue as well. So I think there's also it's not new, right? But I think it was opened pre-pandemic. But I think this is very, very important to highlight, right? So I think everyone is aware of Amazon Go, right? So Amazon Go, basically you have your physical store, right? But you just go in, you just pick whatever you want, just go out, and then basically it detects there's an AI or whatever sorts, right? That Amazon has tricks up its sleeve, right? It determines what products you got, what's your total, and it's gonna bill you for whatever the cost of the products that you checked out of the store, right? So I mentioned this earlier as well. It's not really replacing whatever is your brick and mortar stores. I think that's still key in terms of the client's perspective, right, in all of their showcases and whatnot. But I guess it's more of just bridging whatever is the online and whatever physical stores that they have, and make sure everything is seamless, everything is aligned in terms of their branding. What you see is what you get, right? So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, pretty cool. So I think you brought up a good point. So if you see your supermarket downstairs closing shop, right, maybe they're just being smart about things. Yeah. So yeah.
Online
Moving
delivery.
on. Yeah, online delivery, you never know, right? Yeah. So maybe Nick, I'll direct the question to Jem as well. Have there been any interesting case studies of you've seen businesses moving into e-commerce or any interesting projects you've done for e-commerce?
For e-commerce, nothing. But the one of the case studies that we have is in one of the project that I have. It's an insurer, one of the leading insurer company that I have. So they are really much more before the way they do say their sales is more on through agents, personal agents that they're really going selling those policies, etc., insurance. But when they move to digital commerce in terms of transforming that one into a digital platform wherein they just do their the content and the how you get your quotations and policies online, and then there's also a live chatbot that you can also inquire personally if you have clarifications or inquiry about your policies that you have. It's really helped them as well increase their sales on doing those digitalization, because customers can just do live quote of their policies that they want without really talking directly to an agent. And then, of course, if there are just some clarifications, they just can do the live chatbot. And there's also a series of questions already there that they can just fill through to answers, etc. And then the advantage of that one as well is, I just want to relate that one is really help increase their sales. It's because it's just people just go directly to their site, try to get code instead of just scheduling an appointment to an agent. And in just a split of minutes or seconds, they can already get their policy code. And then if they're happy with that one, they can just go with a different payment online that we have that, as Bryan mentions, there is a credit card, bank transfer, or via PayPal.
Cool. Yeah, I think one thing to draw back, right, to what Bryan was saying, which is about ease of access, ease of payments.
Yeah.
So you can really see it throughout this whole journey that you described, right? That those core principles are actually there, and it's really very apparent in the way the industry is moving today. So maybe Chel, if I could quickly get your input as well, any interesting case studies you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna focus on my main concern about customer experience, right? And adding in performance in there, because that's really very important. Because we're having analytics like, Adobe Analytics or even Google Analytics, where you can see when the customer log into the site, and after a few seconds, maybe 10 or 15 or 20, they will leave, they will go out and leave the site, right? So those are basically an analytics that we actually see in most of the e-commerce site. Now, so there is this, I'm working on a telco project where data like product lists, with product categories is fetched. Those are fetched from the API. Okay, and the API returns hundreds and thousands of product listing, right? Then the requirement is to load all those products into your page. Okay, and the API does not have this pagination on it. Okay, so it's going to be your front end, like your AEM will manage the pagination and even the caching mechanism, right? So you have to manage the filtering, you have to manage the pagination in order for the application to give the users the customer experience that they would like to have, because we don't want our customers to get out from the site immediately, right? We want to have them this experience that when they load the products, they can easily browse the products. Okay, so that is the experience that we have right now. So we came up with various approaches. So one of the approach that we had is using the memory approach. Okay, where you're basically using the list in Java in order for us and make some pagination and logic in there, and caching mechanism inside it. Okay, so that's basically in the memory. Another approach that we actually did is storing those data into temporary storage. Like because we're using React, we're going to be using Redis as a temporary, storage, and then you will be able to filter and do all your logic in there. Another approach that we actually have is by the use of AEM. So that's actually what we're doing, because AEM has this capability in order for you to store, not a huge number of products, right? But at least something that you can store temporarily, refresh it, and you can do all filtering, and you can actually provide the user an experience that products can be displayed immediately, faster. So that is the challenge that we actually had in a telco company, because you're displaying lists of mobile devices, for example, right? And other devices that the telco company has, and they want to capture the audience, they want to capture customer, they want customer to avail and subscribe the packages, for example. So one make sure that we're providing the right performance and customer experience. Yep,
Cool.
I hope that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, that was quite insightful, like how you actually implemented how the thought process went into choosing AEM, and how Redis and all these approaches were thought of, and then how you came to a conclusion and actually went with it and implemented it. I think that was a pretty insightful case study. So I think just thanks all Chel, Bryan, and Jan for sharing. I think now we move on to the next question, right? Just really quickly, I think for just in the view of time, right? We'll just go straight into the design considerations. So I understand, I mean, we've covered a lot about architectural principles, like headless, like what headless architecture looks like, what decoupling should look like, and all that kind of things. So maybe if I could just very quickly, like Bryan, I would just like to bring up this thought about agile architecture, right? Would you like to explain more about agile architecture and how it's something that you are particularly fond of?
Yep, and I think Jam can add into this a bit later. But long story short, right? Slow and steady no longer wins the race. Like that's the bottom line, right? So you don't want to spend like 5 years planning, building, testing in order for you to release one project, right? So that's no longer the case, because if you're thinking about it, right? If it takes you 5 years to actually build something, right? If you're using like a V waterfall model, right? Then that technology is already 5 years old. Be it like that's the latest technology of that platform, or whatever, right? When you started. So given that you haven't done any upgrades to those technologies, right, or you haven't migrated, etc., which I don't think happens a lot in the waterfall projects, right? So it's imperative for the clients to actually release um, based on iterations, right? So that's where the agile concept comes in, right? So you build an MVP, you have your next iteration, right, in the next couple of weeks, right, or a month, with the next set of functionalities, and you just build and build on top of it, right, until you get to a point um, where it's almost like what the complete product, right, or what a client envisioned. So it might take you 5 years to actually build the entire thing, but at least in the first few months, right, you have something running, you have something viable, and you have something that already produces like value or revenue or sales, right? In terms of just postponing it with the last 5 years, right? Like it doesn't really make sense in today's culture, right? And the other key thing that I would want to say is um, automation is no longer optional, right? So um, the longer you go with a certain set of projects, right, you have to have things automated. It just it just makes sense, right? It makes everything easier for you, right? So you don't have to do things like manually every time, right? So you have all of this functionalities, and then you don't automate it, right? It doesn't really make sense. So agile and automation, yeah, that's the key.
Oh, Jam, would you like to add a few words to that as well?
Yeah. So as Brian mentioned, that in agile architecture, it's really important that we deliver it in the smaller pieces. But the important thing right now as well in agile architecture is the business value as well. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar this with business agility as well, because that's also another trend of agile architecture. We're not just building an MVP, we're building an MVP that is customer oriented as well. So we're not just delivering because this is what's the organization want, but we are building this architecture or this product. It's because this has more value to the user or to the customers, and that's how we are going to build or prioritize those applications or those modules that we want to build and deliver. And that's really how agile more on focus, not just by delivering smaller piece, but more on delivering what has much more business value to the user or to the customers.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought what it's always about business value, right? It's not about
Yes.
agility, everything. It all comes back down to what kind of value you're bringing to the table. So yeah,
Correct.
so I think just to wrap it up for the architecture portion, right? It's about every architecture, every architecture has trade-offs, but and there's no perfect architecture. You can do headless, you can do headful. There are different ways of doing it, but at the end of the day, it comes back to how does it impact your customer experience? How does it impact your ease of access, your ease of payments, or how does it impact your marketers? How does it impact every single actor in your chain? And yeah, and what kind of value, what kind of business value does your architecture bring about to your clients or your to the organization that you're working for? So I think those are some key concerns that we should look at when we design any form of architecture. Yeah. So thanks for sharing, John. So over to you, Joy, to take us through our next question.
Yep, I'm learning a lot of technical stuffs because I'm non-technical. So I'm also curious, what are the some challenging architecture scenarios you face and how did you resolve them?
Okay, let me take this up first. So basically, I think Jam and Chel can relate to this, right? So I'll be tackling both ends of the spectrum.
Mhm.
So the first is actually first challenge is if you have um, obviously you want to go with the best, the greatest, right? The latest version of whatever technology. But it might not always be the case where you're just integrating it or using it with the same latest technologies, right? Some clients have their own legacy systems, right? They would want to integrate it to. So that's always a challenge. In some cases, you might have to use middleware, right? In order to just communicate between the two, right? So that the other key thing, right? The other end of the spectrum is going with what's new, basically what's glittering, what's shiny, right? So you have these two new technologies, right? That you're just trying to come together, right? So it's basically a new challenge when you say you have this new CMS technology, you have this new e-commerce platform, you're trying to make it work, right? It might not have certain connections or connectors, right, between those two technologies, but you have to figure it out as architects, right, on how to make it work, right? So I think those are the two common challenges that I've faced so far in my projects. Jam, anything to add?
Yeah, same with what Brian. So most of the project that I really handled before is really having challenges of having a legacy applications that they won't let go, but they want to build a modernization architecture. So
Okay.
so what we did on that one in one of my telco project before is really build an API layer that really connect the legacy platform that we have as well as the modernizations that they want to envision. Like well, before React and Angular during those times that we did, it's not really that famous before. It's the one that we have before is just HTML and CMS. And the one that we have in .NET that's built in MVC Razor. So what we resolve the challenges is because they don't want to have any downtime or disruption in the business. So what we did is just build an API layer on top of that one, and then build a modernization front end user experience design there, and that's how we resolve it. And then later on, when there's not much enough to really continue building those legacy, we were able to decommission the legacy applications without any disruption to the business because the API is already up and running. And then right now, building those modernizations with those architecture that we did, the team now can really build or spin up some new applications in just a span of a month or two, following the agile methodology.
I can imagine as tech architect, you do continuous research and learning. Though are
Yes,
we do have trainings yearly in Accenture, but I think it's another on top task for you to research and be ahead of the game, right?
yes, correct. So yeah, basically, if to be an architect, it's not just about attending class. It's really more on building it through experience as well, and continuous learning. I think I've heard that as well for the different topics that we have. I think I've heard it from Pisho as well that continuous learning will really help you become much more in depth on different technologies that we have right now.
All right, thanks, Jam. I also want to hear the story of Chel.
Yeah, of course. So since you're also a project manager, Joy, I want to touch on some delivery aspects, okay, on building e-commerce, d-commerce integrated into CMS like AEM. Okay, so I'd like to touch on the when we are delivering e-commerce platform, right? And even even in other projects where the customer has this date, okay, they have the launch date, and we cannot do anything about it but to hit and to meet that deadline. Okay, so in terms of architecture, the challenge that we actually had is that because we have a hard date on a launch date on this certain date, so we thought of something. How can we deliver? How can we finish our project on time, and how can we meet that deadline? Okay, so we came up with this. Approaches on AEM, on CMS, where the atomic approach versus composite approach. Okay, so what does it mean? So again, right, on AEM component, we can actually build an AEM component as atomic as we can. For example, if you want a product title as one component, you can do that. Okay, and if you want an image as just one component, that is an atomic component. Okay, and many more. So call it as an A atomic. So component A, component B, and component C. So it's good in terms of reusability. When talking about architecture concern, right? It's very usable, where any applications, any web pages you want to develop, you can actually use it. It's scalable as well. It's easy to maintain, easy to debug. If there are bugs you need to fix. Okay, so that's one. And the second approach that we thought that time is, how about we build our how about we have this approach as composite. When I say composite approach, is that that's A plus B plus C. Okay, if you can imagine that. So it's a combination of one or two or three or more components into one. So let's take an example on again, my previous example earlier about product catalog, right? So as a content author, I will create a page. Okay, if I will be building a page using an atomic components, how long does it take me to finish building that page? So I'm gonna drag and drop my product title in there. I'm gonna drag and drop the image, the prices, etc. So imagine how long does it take you to do that. Okay. Again, in the interest of time, because we have this hard date, right? The launch date. So coming into a composite approach, in which the architecture, we build it as a composite approach, in which as an author, I can just drag and drop a product catalog into my page. Okay, and in there, I can do the authoring, point into the right API endpoint from Hybris, for example, point into the right asset for my images and videos. And then when I publish the page, all of the product catalogs that are available, for example, list of recommended products, are in there. Okay, so those are really very important in terms of building the e-commerce site, not as quickly as possible, but at least you are able to deliver it right on time on those approach. Yeah, again, the atomic and the composite approach. All right, you can do it on a mix of the two, or you can actually do it just a composite approach only. All right, yeah.
Yep, I can relate as part of the delivery team on fixed launch date, right? And one of the important reasons there is compliance to legal laws and policies. So it's very important for the tech arc and the delivery team to work together to meet that target launch date. Thank you, Chal. All right, I think
Okay.
I'll, yep,
Yeah.
go.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks, Shell. Thanks, everyone. So maybe just to quickly wrap up before we go into the Q&A segment, right? Let's just take a few minutes. So Brian, Jam, and Shell, do you have any key takeaways that you want to share with the crowd here as we wrap things up tonight?
Yeah.
So maybe Brian, yeah.
Yep. So I think Accenture's slogan for this last year. I think it was last year, right? Let there be change. So we're we're still expecting the landscape to change, right? So if you think about it, we've come a long way since even 2016, right? In terms of e-commerce, there are a lot of new technologies out there, new functionalities, right? AI, VR, all of those stuff, right? And that's just 5 years ago. Imagine what will happen in the next 5 years, right? So we're no farther from 2016, right, than to 2026. So look forward to, I think, digital transformation. Majority of the companies have already done that, right? So they're looking towards driving whatever the changes that they have in their digital transformation forward, right? So we're still expecting changes in the landscape in terms of e-commerce, in terms of CMS, in terms of analytics, that will only grow farther from today, right? So yeah, exciting times.
Exciting indeed. Yeah. So, Jam, would you like to share something as well?
Yeah, probably key takeaways here for especially for those people that we hear that are aspiring to be an architect as well, similar to us. So as Brian mentioned, the technology is moving fast. So we also need to continue learning as well, align with different technologies we have. Because if we are just stuck to one, it would be a challenge for us to really support different opportunities, as well as difficult for us to grow as well, or meet our aspirations to be an architect. Because to become an architect, it's really more on continuous learning and really experience, real time, hands-on experience on different technologies that you really want to focus on.
Ooh, yeah, continuous learning as well. I think that's a key takeaway. Um, Chel, would you like to share a key takeaway?
Yeah, just real quick. So Murphy's law. Okay, if something wrong is going to happen, you're laughing, Eugene. If something wrong is going to happen, yeah, it will go wrong. Okay, so my takeaway there is doing things right the first time. All right, so what does it mean? So if the architecture is planned, carefully planned from the beginning, right? From the beginning, even from solutioning, starting from the solutioning, right? Execute it properly, then you will not get a visit from Mr. Murphy, right? So yeah, so I'll just give an because I'm gonna be touching not only as an architect, because my role in my project is a large number of allocation as an architect and also a delivery lead. Okay, so I'm gonna touch on this because it's really very important for us to satisfy our client, Accenture client, and also satisfy Accenture client's client, right? So if we still have time, so I'll just give you an example, right? So normally an architect provides guidance, right, to the team, to the delivery lead, to the project management, and to the people below, the developers, the ones doing it. Okay, one very very example and basic guideline that especially on building this type of application, right? It is important that you have the right people. So as a basic guideline of an architect, especially on e-commerce, so in the going forward, in the moving forward, we want to build this application where you have the full stack of your developers. Okay, so in CMS or in AEM, what my guidance there, and personal guidance, is that my front end developers should not only do React. My front end developers should not do their front end development work outside of AEM. Okay, so that's really very important, because if you're gonna be built, so the wrong side there where Mr. Murphy will visit you is that if you are building your front end outside of AEM, then you will have to integrate your front end and your back end. Your back end is the AEM, right? then you will have a problem integrating it. You will have many bugs. Okay. So what happens to your hard date, to your launch date? Okay. So it's really very important that also the delivery lead will listen, right, to the architects. Okay. Because they know the risk, they know what will happen at least, right? And it's discussed. We have the risk management. So they know what's going to happen. So the role of an architect is really very important in delivering e-commerce. So you will not have Mr. Murphy knock on your door, right? So yeah, that's my key takeaway.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good to understand the full as someone as an architect or being on the project, you should know end to end what's going on and not just say like, hey, this is not my problem, it's someone else's problem. And also yeah, and I think the continuous learning part also is pretty like that Jam and Bryan has mentioned also. Yeah. And then also and another thing that Chel mentioned was to plan also. Yeah, and to plan for in scenarios and make sure that Mr. Murphy doesn't visit. Yeah. So I think we've come to the end of our talk, the session. I think the chat, if we could go to the next few slides down. I'm sure I've already seen a few questions coming in. I think everyone's pretty excited to pose the questions to Chel, to Bryan, and to Jam. So if we could go a few more slides down to the chat slide. So yeah, feel free to put your comments on the Mentimeter using the code here. Visit menti.com and just put in your questions there. Yeah. So let me pull up the questions. So I think we have a question here. How does D-commerce integrate to workplace solutions? Yeah, so maybe let's start with Bryan. Do you have any ideas on that?
Workplace solutions. So I haven't had any experience actually with e-commerce and workplace. To be honest, maybe Jam if you have or Chel.
No, I don't have as well.
No,
Maybe let's Jam.
no, I don't have yet experience on that one, but something to we can park on and we can check it.
Yeah, don't worry. Your question won't be left unanswered. We will revisit this on the LinkedIn post, so do check us out there as well. So I think we have another question, right? So I think we've talked a lot about architectural patterns, about what kind of architecture you adhere to. I think we have a question here that asks about what are some design considerations that we actually take as an architect you will take into consideration as well. So maybe Bryan, would you like to share?
Yes. So speed and performance. That's the key thing. So one of our clients is actually very meticulous, right? So they presented us with numbers, and when I first looked at it, it was mind-boggling to me. So it says there that for their clients, right, if it takes more than 3 seconds to load, 86% of the customers will navigate out of the page, right? And then 40% won't actually go back anymore, right? So it's page time, loads, responsiveness, all of those things actually matter, right? So we're in an era, we're in an age, right, where I think we have very fast and reliable internet connections, right? So it's really not an excuse for us to build something so slow, something so painful for our customers, right? So we have to give them the best possible experience that they could have, and one of those key things is actually the speed and performance and the load times of of your apps or web applications.
Cool. Speed and performance. I think that's one key. How about Jem and Chel? Maybe start with Jem.
What else? Um, well, I can't.
I think you
I'm
mentioned something previously about localization as well, right? I think that was a key point that you, yeah. Would you like to share more about that?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. In terms of the localization, so it's really for me it's important as well because there's a really as I mentioned, there are consumers or users that are really more aligned or much more engaged if the applications that they are trying to access is aligned to their to their language or to their culture because it will help them at least it will ease them to have much more accessibility in terms of what they want to use in the applications.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How about Shell?
Yeah, so it's about reusability and scalability, right? As one of the designs patterns on architecture and designing architecture. So like for AEM and CMS, right? It is also important that you understand client requirements. You understand client plans as an enterprise, client plans, and also in the future. So um, in terms of building it as scalable as we can, so for e-commerce, so we know that there is headless, there is also headful, right? So understanding the client requirements would you need to analyze it really. You just not have to focus on the requirements that are in there. Okay, you also have to focus the bigger picture. So looking at the bigger picture, right? You also need to understand how huge the application that you are building. Is it very heavy? Say for example, in the project that I'm working on, we need to separate corporate. We need to separate the store, the e-commerce part, from the corporate. Okay, because on the corporate side, it's really very huge. Okay, there are really a lot of it has multiple integrations. There are really a lot of assets that's been that we build. There are really a lot of pages, 1,000 for example or more. That so you need to analyze what is the design pattern that I need to implement as an architect, right? So what we actually do is we separated the back end and the front end, for example. So because can you imagine we have the head full, okay, the head full architecture, the head full approach, and also we need to have the headless as well. So how are you going to combine them, right? So you need to come up with something that is going to be reusable and scalable. So what we did there is we developed a core, a core for the client that has all the components in there, reusable assets and contents, okay, in which regardless whether, say for example, the corporate side is on a headful architecture, it can actually use whatever assets, core components that we built inside the core platform, right? And then there comes in the e-commerce. There are a lot of transactions happening in there, which is built in headless. Okay, so that is the design pattern. If you can imagine the headless and the headless and the headful, and on the bottom of it is the reusable and scalable core components. So for me, that's actually effective and efficient, especially when you're building an architecture at an enterprise level.
Awesome. I think it's pretty clear that for Shell, you are talking about reusable components beneath your architecture, right? Yeah. So and then we have yeah. So I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us on this. It's 8:30. So thank you for joining us on this session. We really love to have. We really enjoyed our time together with you, and yeah. So if we could give our speakers a round of applause as well, just to appreciate them. Yeah, show them some love. Um, yeah. So just to wrap things up, we have an upcoming session. It's the evolution of loyalty. For any one of you are interested in loyalty, we have a session coming up on the 2nd of November. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And yeah, over to you, Joy.
Yep. Thank you to our guest speakers, Jam, Bryan, and Chel, for sharing your knowledge. I learned first to embrace change, second is to do continuous learning, and then third is to do to do things right from the beginning. And then thank you, Techractive organizers, for this informative event. Thank you to our audience for the support, and see you again next month or to our upcoming events. Together with Eugene, your host, again, this is Joy Kata, Tech for Change Ambassador, signing off. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Thank you.